I welcome everyone to the Every Brain Matters monthly speakers meeting. This group is an online group primarily for people harmed by marijuana who are seeking healing and recovery, but everybody is welcome here. Every Brain Matters community seeks to create a culture of healing by helping each other, because we know the road to recovery is not easy. But together we find hope in our shared experience. We acknowledge that there's different pathways to recovery and that each individual and family makes their own decisions. And we ask you to take what you like from the meeting and leave the rest. So let's all unmute together. Let's start with the serenity prayer. We'll do a moment of silence, and then we'll all say the serenity prayer together. So here's our moment of silence. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. The courage
to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Amen. All right. Thank you, everybody. So just a few housekeeping guidelines. This group does not discuss policies or politics, but please sign up for our newsletter if you want to learn about our advocacy work, or you can contact me outside the time of this meeting. We don't discuss religion, but we encourage members to embrace their faith, and we accept and respect everyone's beliefs and support their freedom of expression. We recommend that you attend support meetings like NAMI or PALS, but we especially encourage Vernon and the Every Brain Matters Climbers meeting that meets every Wednesday. And you can find that information on the website and the link I put in the chat. We can't give medical advice here, and this meeting is being recorded, so that we ask that you mute yourself during the speaker's share and either keep your video on or off so the screen doesn't flash to you. We respect the feelings and privacy of those attending our meetings by not interrupting, questioning, or advising during the first part of the meeting. The last part of the meeting will be open for questions and answers. All right, well, I'd like to introduce Pam Lanhart. She is the founder and executive director of Thrive Family Recovery Resources, which is a nonprofit that helps families nationally connect to resources, education, and support. Thrive became a groundbreaking organization this fall as one of the first family recovery community organizations in the country to receive state human services grant funding to support their work and provide family peer support to those family members impacted by their loved one's substance use. Pam is also a certified family recovery coach, a certified peer recovery specialist, an invitation to change, and a craft practitioner, and a RISE interventionist. She's kind of busy. Pam is also the 2021 recipient of the Faces and Voices of the Vernon Award, honoring her tenacious and outstanding national advocacy work, devoted to spreading the message of recovery and harm reduction and helping families activate the recovery even after the loss of her son was that same year. Most recently, she was appointed to serve on the Minnesota Governor's Task Force to address substance use in her state. So thank you for joining us here to hear Pam as she thrives through her personal loss and continues to give support to each other. So Pam, we are very honored to have you here tonight. I will just share that I've followed you on Facebook for many years, and we've kind of messaged each other every once in a while. So I am just very grateful that you chose to share your experience, strength, and hope with us tonight, because I know each and every one of us will benefit from it. So thank you, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for inviting me. We finally got to meet in person at the Oklahoma Families National Federation of Family Conference. And that was really a great conference, and it was fun to meet your people. I sat at your table, and that was really enjoyable. So I know that a lot of people will probably hear this after the fact. I'm going to run a slide deck just because it just helps me know what's coming next and know what I need to talk about. But I really appreciate the opportunity to share tonight, and I'm going to try to make this shorter than my typical share. Generally, this will take me an hour, but I'm going to try to do it in 45 minutes so that we can get through this. June 23rd, 1997 was really one of the best days of my life. I say one of the top 5 days of my life because I have 4 children and I've been married for 42 years. So it was one of the top 5 days of my life. Now, if Jake was sitting here with me, he would look at me and go, "What are you talking about, Mom?" It was the absolute best day of your life. And honestly, Jake brought so much life into our world. He was one of those kids, like I'm sure many of you have, where he was larger than life. He filled a room. You know, there's a little rhyme that my mom used to say. There was a little girl that had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. And when she was good, she was very, very good. And when she was bad, she was horrid. And that kind of describes my sweet boy, Jake. He was extreme. He was either extremely sad or frustrated or angry, or he was just as happy could be. He just had big, big, big emotions. And from the day he was born, he was a risk taker. If you couldn't find Jake, all you had to do was look up and he would be in a tree, or he would be climbing on our roof. He'd be jumping off the roof. He just loved to climb. He would climb the door jambs in our house. And in his recovery, he continued that love for climbing. He just was born to climb, and he was born to take risks. So why not just climb 14ers in Colorado? He was just one of those kids that I always say you really felt alive when you were around him. October 23rd, 2021 was the worst day of my life. I was sitting on my chair, journaling the way I usually do, and I got a call from a friend of mine out in Colorado, and he's like, "Hey, Pam." And I'm like, "Hey, Josh, what's up?" And he's like, "Pam." And I said, "Josh, what's going on?" And he goes, "Pam, Jake didn't make it." Now, we had always imagined that moment, like many of us that have had kids that have struggled with substance use. And I knew exactly what picture I would use for his funeral. I had planned it, but he was doing well. And I really thought that he would make it out. I was pretty sure I got a message from God one day that said, Jake is going to be in front of people telling his story. So to say it was a shock would be an understatement. I mean, we had a night, as I mentioned, he had battled with substance use since the time he was about 13 years old. And we got a call when he was 13 saying, "You need to come and get him." He came to school with a backpack full of pills. And after he passed away, we were able to read all of his treatment notes. We knew pretty much the history of his substance use and his recovery. But it really started like many of our kids, which was smoking marijuana in the bathroom at the junior high. And after some difficult times, and he was in juvenile treatment court, he was doing a lot better. And then on April 16th, 2016, he was playing rugby and he broke his femur. And I remember standing out on the field, watching them put an IV line of fentanyl in his arm, because if you know anything about femur breaks, there's nothing more painful than that. And I remember saying to God, like, really, God, this is the way this is going to end. But he activated recovery, and he was in recovery for a very long time. And so we really had a lot of hope. Now, what I'm going to share today is a little bit about my journey and why I'm able to show up and talk about this today in the way that I'm able to talk about it. Because one of the things that I learned early on was that I had to work my own recovery program too. I had to do my work. When I work with families, I use the definition of recovery from the dictionary. What is recovery? Recovery is a return to a normal state of health, mind, and strength, or the process of regaining possession or control over something that was stolen and lost. I grew up with parents that had substance use disorder. I have 3 siblings that struggle with substance use disorder and are in recovery now. And in Jake's early years, we really lost a lot. Like many of you who have had loved ones that have struggled, you lose your health, you lose your financial well-being. You might stop some of the things that you used to enjoy. And maybe you've lost relationships, maybe you've isolated. And there's a lot of collateral damage when we have loved ones that suffer and struggle with the disease of addiction. And we were no exception to that. But I knew that I wanted to show up differently for my son. And I knew that one person could change the course of an entire family. I believe that when we as individuals and family members activate our own personal recovery, it changes ecosystems. And there's a ripple effect that goes on and on and on. Now, this is what, of course, we think recovery might look like. Like it's a linear process. You start, and then at some point you sort of phase out of recovery. But for me, my recovery has always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I find myself even now at times getting activated when I don't feel safe. I have, some trauma that I spent a lot of time working through therapeutically. And I feel like my recovery process is actually going to be a lifelong process for me. And I don't feel like I'll ever be there. I will only be made perfect when I meet my God. And so, this is a journey. It's a journey that I've grown to love and embrace. I'm very active in the recovery community. As Aubrey said, I'm actually headed to DC this week to speak at the National Recovery Leadership Summit. So recovery has been really important to me. Sometimes we can get stuck in recovery. And this is what we call the drama triangle. And I know at times I played any one of these roles. We can show up as a victim. Poor me. Nobody knows what it's like to be me. I am the victim. And, we are in some ways, we're all victims of substance use disorder. But if we take on that victim mentality, we'll never grow through the things that we're experiencing. Another way we can get stuck is by taking on that role of rescuer. And you know what I'm talking about, right? If I don't help them, nobody will. I have to be the one to step in to rescue. And sometimes we go back and forth between victim and rescuer. Like, I'm the only one that can do this, poor me. I'm the only one that can do this, poor me. And then we end up being a perpetrator, which is, I'm so effing sick of doing this that I'm just going to cause harm to everybody around me. Like, hurt people. And if we're not careful, we can get so activated and so irritated and so agitated and so angry at the people around us and the disease that's impacting our family that we end up being the perpetrator. We end up causing harm. I often say the victim becomes the victimizer. And while I don't know your personal experience, I do know that we all experience pain in this process. So we get stuck. We get stuck in the pain of substance use, and we have to move through that. I love this quote where it says, courage isn't having the strength to go on. It's going on when you don't have any strength. And so I'm going to share today some of the things that have brought me strength, when we were going through that process with Jacob, him using and then him activating recovery and us doing our own work. And I always say yes, and I never want to invalidate the pain that each one of you is experiencing in your life right now. My pain is very real. And if you follow me on Facebook, you'll know I'll be great one minute, had a great day, mountain biking, climbing mountains. And in any given moment, I can be a puddle. I can be a mess on the floor. Because we live in both spaces when we love someone who is struggling. We live in the space of, this is so hard. I don't know how I'm going to get through it some days. And because of my own personal recovery, I know I will. So I'm just going to share some things that have worked for me as I've activated my own recovery. I did not activate my recovery through a 12-step process. I went to a few 12-step groups. It really wasn't for me, but I had gone through a peer recovery training years ago, and I learned about holistic recovery. I think these practices come somewhat out of the 8 dimensions of wellness, and you can apply many different practices to each one of these areas that I'm going to be sharing with you. So the first area that really got me through and continues to help me today are those routines and rhythms and rituals that I have in my life. As I mentioned, when we found out about Jake, I was sitting on my chair, journaling and reading my daily meditation book. And I'm a person of faith. I read my Bible every day. I wrote a prayer book, and those prayers for my son were written out of that practice and that routine and that ritual that I have every single day of getting up, getting my coffee, going to my chair, sitting in my chair. And that continued to serve me well right after Jake died. And to this day, I still journal. The interesting thing is I journal to him now. So it's become a little bit of a different ritual, but it's a ritual that brings me a whole lot of comfort. And I write to him and I process all those big questions, the whys, the what ifs, the could we have done anything different? But that routine really helped me. I was in a routine of physical exercise, so movement. I think movement is really, really important, and especially when we're in a traumatic situation. Whenever I'm working with a family and they're activated and things are very chaotic, I will actually recommend that they just move from one room to the next or move from one place to the next, moving in their physical environment. And we're big outdoors people, so I just had this routine of walking, and I just kept walking every single day. So you probably have routines that you don't even realize are serving you well in your recovery process. I eat healthy. I drink a lot of water. And I was so into those practices that when this traumatic event happened, I was able to maintain that. And then we've adopted some rituals since Jake died. Every night I play a certain song, I look at his picture, and it just brings me a lot of comfort. I think one of my greatest fears is that I'll go a day without thinking about him. And I never didn't think about him when he was alive, so I can't imagine not thinking about him now. But I've adopted some rituals. And then rhythms are those, your body rhythms, like when we don't go to bed at the time that we know we need to, and we sort of stretch our limits and our capacity, that's when we have breakdowns. So I always listen to my body. I go to bed at the same time at night. I wake up at the same time in the morning. And those things really help me early on. And even now, I just maintain these routines in my life that bring me comfort and help me feel really safe. And I think safety is a huge issue when you have a loved one that might be struggling. And I know that my behaviors of control and manipulation and all those things that I did early on were out of my need to feel safe. And once I learned how to do that and put these things into practice, then it has really helped me through the last 18 months. The second thing is, I always say our story has power. Tell your story, share your story. Now, I think it's important when you have living children to be careful about how you share your story. And I use person-centered language. I don't use the term addict or alcoholic. We don't use stigmatizing terms in our groups that we conduct. So I'm really careful. And even when I shared Jake's story before he passed away, he was a person in recovery. I shared it in a way that really honored his journey. I think addiction is a disease, but I think our story has power. We changed legislation with our story. I was scheduled to do a talk on November 11th, 2021, and Jake died on October 23rd, 2021. And the organizer of the event said, hey, if you don't want to come and you don't want to show up, that's totally fine. And right before that, I had heard a guy tell a story about 9/11, and he was a survivor from the South. He was on the floor of the South Tower that the plane hit. And the interviewer had asked him, how do you get through that? How do you not have survivor's guilt? And he said, I started telling my story right away. Addiction flourishes in isolation and secrets. And so when we share our own personal story, and especially our story of recovery, what people want to hear is hope. Spread the hope. Like, tell people how you're doing this and how you're getting through each day. And that way I was able to control the narrative of my story and tell it in a way that was authentic to me. Now, this next one, reframing our narrative. This was a really big one for me. I mean, after all, we were a family in recovery, and I had told my story. And now I had to think about how am I going to tell this story? And for me, and I think anytime we have a loved one that really struggles, we often ask ourselves those really hard questions, like, why us? Why me? What if? What if we would have done this differently? I was just talking to a doctor who does a lot of work with in the area of prevention with kids that have, they're called 2E kids, twice exceptional. So they're high IQ, and they also usually have some mental health issues. And, we always can look back and go, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have said this differently. And when I was at a healing retreat at Onsite in March, we did an exercise where we asked that big what if question. And then our therapist asked us to answer it as if our child answered it. And, there were a couple what if questions that I had to really work through. One was, he had kind of walked away from the faith that we had raised him in. And one of my big what ifs was, what if we wouldn't have raised you in the church? And then I wrote down what I thought Jake would say. And I think what Jake would have said was, Mom, raising us in the church changed your life. It made you who you were. And Mom, I didn't walk away from God. I just found God in a different way. I found him in the mountains of Colorado. And Mom, I know that you loved me, and I know that love was the overflow of your faith. Another narrative that I had, or what if question that I had was, what if I broke you? What if it was so bad and I broke you so bad that you were unfixable and that's why you died? And, I think what Jake would have said in that is, Mom, you don't have that much power. You didn't break me. You loved me well. And I know that we've all have narratives that we ruminate on over and over and over again. What if I would have had him go to that school instead of homeschooling him? What if I would have homeschooled him instead of going to that school? What if I would have raised him in the church? What if I wouldn't have raised him in the church? And those narratives, living in those what ifs, will hold us back and really make us ill. And so I think that it's really important to think about, your healthy loved one and what he will say down the road. And he or she will look back and say, no, Mom, Dad, you did the best you could. You loved me well, and I always knew that I was loved. And that's the narrative that I've adopted as I have to reframe my story. We really have to take care of our whole self. And, this is all four of these things: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. When we are impacted by another person's substance use, we can stop taking care of ourselves. Many of us stop exercising. We stop our spiritual practices. You know what? We get mad at God. And I have to tell you, if anybody had a reason to be mad at God, it would be me. I freaking wrote a book, a prayer book. I prayed for my son every single day, right? I have a Facebook page, Praying Our Loved One Home. It has 11,000 followers. I should have been the one to get my prayers answered, and I wasn't. And that can make me mad some days, and God can handle it. He's a big God. Whether you believe in a Christian God or a Native American God or, a higher power, that person, that thing that you believe in is bigger than you, and that force can handle your pain. So take care of yourself. Take care of yourself emotionally. Practice emotionally healthy behaviors. And that's why you go to groups. That's why you learn. That's why you continue to grow. Mental well-being. There is no shame in going to see a therapist, going to see a psychologist, a psychiatrist. There are seasons in my life. Some of them were brought on by physical ailments that I didn't even know I had, where I had to take medications. It's kind of funny because I speak a lot to Christian communities, and I'm like, you know what? I know Jesus heals, but I'm still wearing glasses. Sometimes we need an assist in that healing, and that's what doctors are for, right? So don't be afraid to take care of your mental and physical well-being. When was the last time you had a mammogram? When did you last have your colonoscopy? When have you had a full blood count? Are you taking care of yourself? Because your loved one will not get help from you if you aren't alive. So live. You have to stay alive for them. People always say, oh, I recovered for myself. And I'm like, nope, I recovered for my family. And that's the honest truth. My family motivates me. My community motivates me to stay healthy and well. I think if I had to live for myself, I wouldn't be living, because, I'm here for the one. I'm here to help the person in front of me. I also believe that creative expression is so, so, so important. I remember in the darkest days of my growing up years, when my home was really unsafe, I would go down the stairs and I would play the piano. And I would just play and play and play for hours at a time. Music has always been a huge part of my life. And I worked with families who, have sort of come out of their difficult struggles and activated their recovery. And they'll send me a note and say, here's a picture that I painted. I'm painting again. Here's a poem that I wrote. The world needs what you have to give them, your gifts, your creative gifts, whether it's writing. I write a lot. I put a lot of my thoughts on Facebook, and, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so oversharing. Yesterday, I sat in front of a mom and she had tears running down her face. And she's like, you have no idea how much your Facebook posts have helped me. And I don't say that at all to boast, because honestly, I could care less if one person read it and liked it. I do it because it's a way for me to express what's going on in my life. And I figure if I'm feeling these feelings, for example, I feel like I'm broken some days. I feel like I'm an imposter. I often feel like I don't deserve the amazing life that I've been given. And, there's times when I'm just really vulnerable and authentic, and people are like, oh my gosh, I feel the same way. You never know how somebody else is going to benefit from the gifts and talents that you have been given. And I believe that we are meant to give those to the world. And again, whatever that might be, maybe you love yoga and your creative expression is to teach a yoga class. And that's part of recovery, I believe, is really finding our true authentic self and sharing it with the world. Another part of my recovery has always been community and connection. And, we find community in different ways. Sometimes we find it in a support group. Sometimes we find it in a church group. Sometimes we find it in a yoga class. Sometimes we find it in my book club. I'm telling you, my book club, I have these girls And speaking of creative expression, when Jake was in active addiction, I don't think I ever read for pleasure. I think I almost felt like I didn't deserve it, like I didn't deserve to have fun, and I didn't deserve to be happy. And about 4 years ago, some of my OGs, my old girls that I've been friends with for 30 years, restarted their book club, and I joined their book club. And I'm telling you, they showed up for me when Jake died. Like they served me, they brought me meals, they cleaned my house. I run support groups as part of our organization, and we've got a really large group that meets here in our area. And, you know, they served at the meal afterwards. They were there before Jake died, and they were there after he died, and they're there for me now. I had one girl who had never lost anyone, and she wrote me a note once a week for the first 52 weeks after Jake died, every single week. So I have a friend who is a really good friend, and I just found out she has cancer. And guess what I'm doing? I'm writing her a card every single week. Hey, I'm thinking of you. I just want you to know that I love you and that I'm praying for you. That's connection. That's community. And again, you know, we isolate because we feel like we're the only ones going through what we're going through. And I often say, we're not all in the same boat, because I don't know your personal lived experience. I don't know your pain. I don't know what you're going through, but we are all in the same ocean. And, you know, I just love connecting with my community, and we can think outside of the box, but we can't live in isolation. And I think this is really why, you know, it's interesting. I have to share this little bit of data. I was at a community event recently with our DEA, and they said during COVID, the fentanyl seizures at the border went way, way, way down. And the rates of overdose went way, way, way up. And why do you think that is? It's because during those, especially that first year of COVID, people were so isolated. And fentanyl especially impacts the amygdala, right? It releases oxytocin, which is the love hormone. And so if people aren't connecting with one another and they're connecting with a drug, you know, they're going to keep that connection. So we're really competing with, you know, those connections with our loved one. And I really am an advocate of staying connected, however possible. Of course, we have to be safe. We have to have boundaries. But when we are connected, we're not controlling our loved one, but we're connecting with our loved one. That gives us a ton of influence in their life. And that's one thing we were super proud of with Jake. We were always connected to him, and we always stayed in community with him. He was invited to our events. He was invited to our activities. There were times when he came and he probably wasn't in the best place, but I think because we treated him with human dignity, he treated us the same way. So except for a few years when he was young, and, you know, teenage years, kids go through that rebellious sort of stinker phase. But especially after he turned 18, he was just really respectful to us. And because we met him where he was at, it created some moments. So I drew, when I was at onsite, I drew this picture of my community and the people that are in my community that are closest to me. And I could have made this a ton bigger. I could have made probably 100 circles of people that are, you know, in that inner circle and the next. So I always say, like, you know, my OGs, my girls are my inner circle, and then my family is kind of in there. And then beyond that, I have these layers of community, and they just, it's just such a comfort to know that if anything happened, they would be there for me. Jake's funeral, I think we had I don't know, 450 people at his funeral, and we have over 2,000 views online. And it's not because he didn't have that many friends. It was because we just had developed this huge community that, you know, we really relied on in the worst of those times. So if your community looks like this, you know, you can't even identify maybe more than 1 or 2 people that you are connected to and that you're relying on, you may want to take a look at your community, because honestly, we cannot heal unless we're in community. I remember years ago, I worked for Dale Carnegie Training, and he had a quote that said, "We will be the same as we are 5 years from now, except for the books that we read and the people that we spend time with." So what I like to do is find people that are smarter than me, that are doing good work and doing it better than I am. And then I latch on and I try to figure out, you know, what they're doing and what things they might be able to help me with that will work for me. And, you know, I'm not anything, but I am around people that are really smart and really talented, that lift me up and build me up and say, yeah, Pam, you can totally do that. You've got this. And then the last part of this that I want to share is healthy, meaningful purpose. I early on in this journey, I started helping other people. I looked around and in my area, we're in the it's funny because Minnesota is the land of 10,000 lakes, but we also call it the land of 10,000 rehabs. We're in the shadow of the largest treatment provider in the country, which is Hazel and Betty Ford. And so it's a lot of 12-step going on here. And I remember early on thinking, you know, there has to be a more holistic way to help families. And I imagined the organization that I've created today. And that was part of my mission. That was part of my meaningful purpose. But there's other things that are part of my life I'm going to share in a minute. So I want you to think about, like, why are you here? You know, why are you here? Are you here to retire and play golf? I mean, you can still do that. But maybe when you play golf, you play in relationship with other people and you lift them up and you encourage them. Maybe your meaningful purpose is being a grandma or a grandpa and showing up for those kids. There's lots of ways that we fulfill our purpose. My husband has a ministry program where we take men and women out to the wilderness to climb mountains and to experience nature. And we do those at a very, very low cost. So we're a family of purpose. Here are some things that bring me meaning and purpose in my life. I hope you can see that slide. But I have 3 other kids and 10 grandchildren that I need to show up for. And that keeps me mission-minded. That keeps me focused and healthy. We are a family that loves the outdoors, and we have 3 generations that mountain bike race together. So that's something meaningful in my life. I love to write, and I wrote this book. And then my work that I do is super meaningful and very, very important to me. And then I want to talk about this middle picture. I'm going to try to do it without crying. I don't know if I can. When we were cleaning out Jake's apartment, we found a board. And in Colorado, there's 58 mountain peaks that are over 14,000 feet. Colorado has the highest peaks in the 48 contiguous states. Jake's mission was to climb all 58 of those peaks. And when we found his mountain peak board, he had 20 unique summits that he had done. And he had 38 that he needed to finish. And so one of the things that we do is we go out to Colorado and we climb mountains. And we climb mountains to raise awareness for addiction. And we climb mountains to honor Jake and his legacy. And we bring Jake up. We bring a little bit of his ashes every time we do a unique mountain peak. And when we're at the top, we let go and we make sure Jake touches the top of that mountain. And then we come down and we pin his board. And that's been something that's been an incredibly meaningful mission for us. We've been able to, share his story as a result of that and share his legacy. And his recovery, there's a quote that we had on his program, and it said, "I am well again. I came to life in the cool winds and crystal waters of the mountains." And the mountains were his healing place. And when we're in the mountains, we sense him and we see him and we feel him. And so that's just really taken on a life of its own. And I imagine someday we might use that even to raise money. We have a URL called Summit for Recovery. And I think there's something bubbling there where we might combine the climbing community and the recovery community, because a lot of people out there that climb are in recovery. So that's something that we love to do, and we're just honored to be able to carry on his mission. And I just want to end here with this little quote. It says, "We are all like a piece of broken pottery. That pot can be glued back together, but it will never be the same. However, it can still hold water." And my hope today in just sharing my story is that it might inspire you, that even though you might feel broken and you might feel like you're holding on by a thread, that you are not beyond repair, that you have a reason for being here, and that we can turn our lives around. And even throughout difficult times and difficult seasons, we can continue to have an impact for our loved one, for our family, and for our community. So with that, I am going to end this little talk. Just thank you for allowing me to share, and we just appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Pam. That was absolutely beautiful and very inspiring and gave us a lot of hope. Thank you for sharing your son with us and your journey and all the tools and resources that you developed. We will open it up for questions or comments. Please, anybody, just unmute yourself if you'd like to say something or put a question in the chat.
Hi, Pam. My name is Bart. Thank you so much. Wow, very powerful. We lost our son in August of 2018, and so you're right. It's like having the connection with other people and the community has made all the difference. Sometimes I'll talk to people about how if someone had said like 20 years ago, if this happens in the future, can you have a joyful life, and could you go on in your life and live a good life? And I would be like, no way, But because of people like you and Aubrey and other people that give me support and help me, and then also give me the opportunity to help others. Anyways, it's made all the difference. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Art, thank you for sharing a little bit of your story. I'm so sorry for your loss as well. And, I hate that we're in the same ocean, right? And that ocean of grief and loss. And, I think that for me, it's just, helps me get through it to know that we're giving back.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so thanks again.
I see somebody unmuting. I would just like to say, I have followed Pam for years. I don't even know when I started following her, and I have greatly benefited from her Facebook posts too. And I knew you climbed mountains, but I didn't know the reason behind that and the purpose behind that. And I'm still crying over that because that's so beautiful. What a beautiful thing to do to honor your son. And I think you know this, Pam. I'm from Colorado. So I'm from Pueblo, and the mountains were a very special place for my family. Right.
Well, the second slide, him and I were at the top of Grays, and that was the first summit that I ever did. And he took me up, and he was the kind of kid, it was so sweet because, he always sort of put on this, kind of, he had a swagger, and he just kind of that devil may care attitude. But we're climbing up the top, and when you climb, you're looking down all the time. I mean, you're climbing over rocks and using poles, and at least I was looking down a lot. And he would stop me and he'd say, like, Mom, stop, just look back, stop, just enjoy the view, and when we got his phone, I mean, it had thousands of pictures of him at the tops of mountains, like just so many. We have so many good pictures of him, and he just got really healthy out there, and he really loved it, and he taught us to love it too. So actually, I will tell you something. That love for mountains really started when he was 14 years old, and he was already kind of using a little bit and getting into trouble. He was a little stinker. And my husband took my boys out, and they did their first summit together. So we're from Minnesota, where the elevation is 800 feet, I have a picture on my wall behind me of them at the top of their very first summit. So my husband, every year, because summers were so hard, when you have a little teenager in there using substances, and he would scoop him up and take him out there and just lean into him and invest in him, and they would climb mountains. And so after Jake went out to treatment in Arizona in 2018, we had a conversation with him, and we're like, you can create whatever life you want. Where do you want to go? Like, if you could throw a dart and do aftercare anywhere. And he said, I want to live in Colorado. So we found an aftercare program in the Denver area. He lived in Lakewood, and he had a great life there. Like, he really did have he had an apartment and a girlfriend and a job. He had really built and we still are in touch with his girlfriend. She's freaking adorable. So we do feel lucky that way.
We hope she's doing well. We've got another question in the chat. It says, hey Pam, thank you for sharing your story. My son is in recovery with all its ups and downs. I was wondering if you know of good resources to use for helping families, like an adult Sunday school curriculum.
Yeah, so I've written a faith-based curriculum that we give out for free, and that could be an option. There's a couple books that I really love. Dina Yohei has a book called Hope for Hurting Parents that I think is a really good book. There's another book written by Danny Silk called Keep Your Love On. And those are, faith-based books that really are just great books that you could do like a book study with them. I don't know of, of course, some churches have Celebrate Recovery, but I've been to a ton of different CR meetings, and none of them really have anything for parents. So it's a little bit tricky that way. So I would like to hear more about the family climbing program. So my husband has a nonprofit. I'll put the URL in here. It's called Wild Heart Adventures. And we have organized 5 trips out to Colorado for the summer. So if you're not from that area, we just have people meet us out there, and we provide everything. So it's turnkey. All you have to do is, you know, show up with clothes and hiking boots on. We provide the food, the gear, and all the gear is top end gear, Osprey backpacks. And then we have a couple different levels of trips. So we have a women's only trip. We have a men's only trip in July. We have a mixed trip in August. That's we're not doing a summit, but we're just doing some day. So we're going to base camp and then do some more moderate climbs for people that don't think they can do a 14er, or, you know, they're not sure. So all of the information and the events are on his website. So
great, thank you. Lisa says, thank you for sharing your story. You are a warrior in an unimaginable battle. I have a son struggling not with addiction, but with the aftermath of cannabis-induced psychosis. We are on a 7-year ride, but I'm still hopeful. And any insight is welcome. I pray constantly.
You know, Lisa, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. And, you know, when we do our groups, we really, they're equipping families to use some very nonviolent communication and cognitive skills. And for me, those motivational interviewing skills of active listening and open-ended questions and being curious and not trying to fix things, but just wondering why and asking really helped to diffuse. I have a daughter in recovery from mental health issues and self-harm. So we've had both, you know, we have one son that we love. We have 4 kids and we're, you know, 50-50, but there's also, I think that National Federation for Families they offer webinars and informational stuff all day long, and they keep it in libraries. And I think they're an amazing resource for families that have kids that have mental illness or mental health issues. So, you know, the battle with this psychosis, as you know, is probably going to be a lifelong battle for him. And it's probably going to be a lifelong battle for you as well. And the best thing I can say is, and I know it's a coin thing, we can't pour from an empty cup, you know, so take care of yourself. And the other thing I know is I couldn't give what I didn't have. And so I couldn't be safe for people when I didn't feel safe myself. And so I think that we just have to create an environment in our family that is safe, that is empathetic and compassionate. And, you know, you can't do this without community. And so just leaning into the people in your life that can support you through this. You know, one thing that was something that I think I was just wired for was I never, ever was a victim in this. I never took on that role. And I think some of it's my own ADHD, big problem solver. Some of it's just the way I grew up. But I think that, you know, when we start to look outside of ourselves to give back, to create our own mission and purpose in our lives, then we can move from that place of, you know, being paralyzed by our loved ones' struggles to a place of being healthier. And so I hope that helps a little bit, but I know it's hard. And it's hard when you go, this is chronic, right? This is like going to be my life for the rest of my life. And that's difficult. And I'm sorry you're going through that.
Thank you, Pam. And if anybody wants to unmute, please do. You can join the conversation. It's not formal here at all. We're just laid back having conversation. And I love the way Pam says we heal in community. And I know Bart mentioned earlier the support that he mentioned I give him. I just want to correct that. He gives me, he supports me tremendously and gives me hope. And him and his wife Hazel have set such an example for me. Like, you know, we had a conversation one day where we could just go destroy ourselves and our pain. And like Pam said, be a victim, or we can enjoy our life and be okay and move on and find those fun things in life. So I just appreciate this conversation so much. Matter of fact, I would label your presentation as beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I always found people that were way worse off than I was, but were doing better than I was. Because I thought, if they can get through that thing, whatever that thing was, then I can get through this thing. And, you know, Lisa, you're a person of faith. And I know for me, it was like, if I said I trusted God, then I knew I had to trust God with the worst possible outcome. And I got there way before Jake died. Like I saw people who grieved well. And I thought, if anything ever happens, I want to be like that person. And I know we can't monitor grief, and it's not prescriptive at all, and you're in grief, like this is a grief process for you. But I do know that I paid attention to how people went through their loss and walked through this. And you know, I think I had really, again, I think the reason why I am able to share my story the way I can share it today is because I had done so much of this work. And then part of this, and you know, I want to say this and I want to qualify it because I never want to shame anybody. And especially if you've lost your child, you know, what I know is that, and this is for the living, so I just want to speak this over those of you who have living children. In the early years of Jake's addiction, we were very confrontational. There was a lot of chaos, and there was a lot of things that we did that caused harm. And at about the age of 18, we sat in front of an advisor, and he said to us, "Are you going to be right for the sake of justice, or are you going to love for the sake of relationship? Because love never fails." And we really changed. We changed our way of being with Jake. We read books like The Anatomy of Peace and Braving the Wilderness. And we stopped treating him like an addict and started treating him like a human being. We stepped out of confrontation and started creating moments of connection. And I think, you know, we had done so much repair in our relationship as a result of the changes we made. And I don't say that at all because we're anything special. What I know is that the way we behave in this disease impacts our loved one significantly. And we just really became intentional. So, you know, I remember sitting in front of someone one day and they're like, "I know your heart, but sometimes your heart doesn't match your behavior." And that was like a big like call to action for me. And so I do my work every day. What are my core values? How do I want to show up? Do I show up different on Facebook than for my community? Or would the people in community say, I'm the same person out there as I am in my home? And that's how I sleep at night, because my work is to be intentional. You know, these are my core values. This is how I want to be. I want to be kind, compassionate, caring, loving. Brene Brown says, if you have good boundaries, you can tread water forever. And I wanted to show up that way. And I feel like even at times when I'm activated, I'll take a step back now and I'll ask myself, how do I want to show up? Is this how I want to be in this situation, in this relationship? And my work is always that my behavior aligns with my core values and my intentions, because all the good intentions in the world don't matter if you're showing up in a way that causes harm. And while we don't cause addiction, I do know that I contributed it to a lot of conflict and a lot of chaos and a lot of added trauma because of the way that I was showing up. And, you know, we all did our work. We all did. My husband changed. I changed. One of the greatest testimonies in our family is that my kids all had great relationships with one another. And I think they picked up on the fact that we were treating Jake as a human being and that he had an illness. And they treated him that way as well. And so that's was my work in all of this. Was I really wanted to align with my values, and I really wanted to show up with intention, and I continue to do that work every single day.
Thank you, Pam. That was beautifully said. I think we will end here. We appreciate your time. We wish you a wonderful, safe trip where you spread more messages of hope. I just can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for everything you've done. So let's have a moment of silence again. Let's close with the serenity prayer. Use your moment of silence as you wish to use it, please. God, grant me the
serenity to accept the things I cannot change,
the courage to
change the things I can,
and the wisdom
to know the difference.
Thank
you so much.
Wow. That was so good. I want to clap. Yay. Yay. Beautiful.
Well, thank you for having me. Thanks for inviting me.